Welcome to the 7th video in our series of quilts and projects using 5-inch squares or charm packs. For my version, I'm going to flip the values, so I need 173 dark and 96 light charm squares. For my collection of charm packs, I've picked Snowman Gatherings 4, Imaginary Flowers, Morris Meadow, Field of Flowers, Rustic Gatherings, Bonheur de Jour, and Things Above. I really liked the way these all looked together when seen from the side. They just had a nice flow of colors, and then I also added in some lights from my charm box, extras that I'd had left over from other projects. These leftover lights are from other projects that I've done in the past, and I have stored them in my charm box, and so now this is a great opportunity to use them up. So that's a total of 8 charm packs I'll be using for this pattern called Charm Saturday. The pattern is available free on the Moda Fabrics website. We will leave a link in the description below to help you go right to the pattern. Now I need to sort out the fabrics. I'm going to look for the 96 lights that I need first. Each of the stars in the quilt is made from 2 charms. One charm is for the center of the star, and the other charm is cut into 4 squares for the star points. Sometimes charm packs will have 2 of a light in the charm pack, so I'm going to find as many duplicates as I can. Otherwise, I'm just going to put 2 light pieces that look good together to make a star. I'm going to set aside the rest of the light fabrics in case I need them if I make a wrong cut. Now that I've picked through all the lights, it's time to find all the dark fabrics I need. I need 173 5-inch squares of dark fabrics. I'm going to go through all of the charm packs, picking out the darkest fabrics first, and then at the end, when I have more of a medium tone fabrics left, I can choose the darkest ones of those. I'm going to count them out in piles of 10, just so I can double check that I have enough. The goal is to have a strong contrast between the lights and the darks, so I'm trying to pick the lightest of the lights and the darkest of the darks. Now that I've counted out 173 darks, I've got a nice pile, a good assortment of medium to dark fabrics. I'm going to put the spare pieces with the leftover light squares. I'll keep them close by in case I decide to use them in the quilt. I'm going to place all the dark squares in this bucket so I can randomly pull out pieces and not pay too much attention to the color or the design of the piece I'm using next. For each star, you will need 2 5-inch squares. One that will remain a 5-inch square. The other will be cut into 4 equal squares that are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. To help me stay organized, I pinned the star point squares to the center square. Sometimes it's obvious because it's the same fabric. Other times I had put 2 pieces together that were different but looked good together, so I needed a way to keep track of things. You can cut them one at a time, or you can stack several at once. Just make sure you keep them in order so you know which fabric points go with the fabric squares. I'd been wanting to make this pattern for a while, but struggled with the stars disappearing into the background. Then I realized if I switched the values, the stars would stand out more, and I knew I would like that better. Once all the charms are cut, it's time to head to the sewing machine and start laying it out and sewing it together. You'll want to refer to the diagram on the pattern to help you lay it out. For the top row, I'm going to need 13 dark squares. Now I put them in this bucket and I'm just pulling them out at random. The only time I let myself put one back was if they came out and they were the same color or the same pattern. The goal is to mix it up a little bit and not have the same looking piece all the way across a single row. For my second row, I'm going to need 7 darks alternating with 6 light star squares. The light stars range from very plain to kind of busy designs in off-white, cream, and soft gray. I tried to have a variety of prints and colors in each of the star rows. This will be more pleasing to the eye. I'm going to lay out and sew 2 rows at a time. I didn't want to get overwhelmed, and if I just do a little bit every day, it won't take so long to get done. If you have a large design wall and want to lay out the whole thing at once, I think that'd be a fantastic idea. But if you have limited space, you can certainly lay it out 2 rows at a time and get the quilt done. The slanted stars have 6 star points. 2 are made from the corners of the 5-inch square, and 4 of the star points are made by placing smaller squares on the corners of adjacent large squares and sewing corner to corner to make triangle points. This next step is the tricky part, sorting out the star point squares to match up correctly from row to row. I pinned all of mine in place before I did any sewing. The first thing I did was just to try to get the single point matched up to the right square above it that it needed to be sewn to. And then I went back and put it in the actual corner I wanted to sew it into for the corner to corner seam. If any of your dark fabrics are directional, you need to decide ahead of time if you want them all to face a single way or if you're just not going to pay any attention to that and sew them how they come. I decided early on I wasn't going to pay attention to any of the directional fabrics and just sew them the way they were laying down on the table. So to figure out where to put the lighter squares, the square above the light square gets a small light square in the bottom right-hand corner of the dark square. So that means on the top row, all of the light 2.5-inch squares will be in the bottom right corner of the dark 5-inch squares. For the second row, the dark square to the left of the light 5-inch square also gets a small light square in the bottom right corner of the dark square. The dark square below the light 5-inch square will also get a light square in the upper left corner of the dark 5-inch square, but that row isn't available yet, so pin it to the center of the 5-inch light square so it keeps it away from the edge, so when you're sewing, you can just ignore it. The dark squares to the right of the light 5-inch squares will get a small square of light fabric in the upper left corner of the square. When you're pinning in the 2.5-inch light squares, you're always going to be using the upper left and the lower right corners. Once everything is pinned, it's time to start sewing. You can either draw lines corner to corner so you have a line to follow, or you can use diagonal seam tape and not have to mark anything. All you need to do is sew corner to corner, and then if you want to, you can sew an extra line 1/2 inch away from the first line to have spare half square triangle units you can use in another project. For this particular project, I wasn't really in the mood to sew the extra seams, so I just cut a 1/4 inch away from the first line and tossed those leftover triangles into a Ziploc bag. I might decide later to do something with them, or I might just toss them. I was working on just a few squares at a time, so it was pretty easy to stay organized and put pieces back in the right place. Once all the seams have been sewn, it's time to press. I press towards the triangle corner, but you could also press open if you prefer. I pressed one piece at a time so I could keep it organized and stacked the way it came over from the sewing machine. Now it's time to sew the rows. I worked on both rows at the same time, adding pieces from right to left. The start points in the top row should always be in the lower right corner. Then I did the second row, and the second row, the start point should be in the upper left and lower right corners. After I sent the second row through, I cut the first row off the back of it and then added my next square. If this seems a little complicated, you can always number the squares 1 through 13. That way you know that you are sewing the right two pieces together. Use whatever method makes the most sense for you to keep things straight. While I'm sewing these first two rows, I'm going to give you a few other ideas for making this quilt personalized for you. One way to make this quilt easier would be to make the stars all out of one fabric. To do that, you would need about 2 yards of fabric. You'd need 6 strips that are 5 inches to get 48 5-inch squares, and then 12 strips that are 2.5 inches to get 192 squares that are 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. This would really streamline the sewing of the star points onto the 5-inch squares of the dark fabric. You would need 28 5-inch dark squares with one corner that's light, and you would need 82 dark squares with opposite corners that are light. For that, you could sew all the corner pieces in ahead of time and then lay out all the rows at once. Another option would be to have all of the dark or background in one fabric. For that, you would need about 3 1/3 yards of a dark fabric. You would cut 22 strips that are 5 inches by the width of fabric, and from those 22 strips, you would cut 173 squares that are 5 inches by 5 inches. It might be fun to put a variety of stars on a one-colored background. Another way to think about this quilt would be to stick to school, team, or college colors for the backgrounds and the stars. For example, pick a variety of yellow fabrics for the stars and put it on a variety of purple squares for the background. That would make a great quilt for a Vikings fan. Or possibly a variety of golds on green backgrounds for a Packer fan. The possibilities for color combinations are endless. If I make this quilt again, I think it would be fun to pick a bunch of neon fabrics for the stars and put them on a bunch of different colored black backgrounds. I think that would have a really intense, fun look to it. For my quilt, I had chosen 7 different charm packs from different moda designers, plus some leftover pieces from other charm packs I'd used in the past. I had 2 different charm packs by Primitive Gatherings, although the colors didn't match between the 2 different collections at all. I had a collection from Catherine Watson, by Gingerbread, Fancy That Design House, and Barbara Brackman. And the last one I had was from French General, and the title of that I had a hard time pronouncing, but it meant, in the French translation, it meant happiness of the day, and that kind of made my day when I found that out. The look I was really going for was that to be scrappy and to have a variety of fabrics in it. If you'd like to have a more controlled color story, you could pick 8 matching charm packs or 8 charm packs from the same designer that have similar color palettes. As I'm sewing the rows together, I'm constantly double checking that I'm putting the star points in the right positions. I was very lucky when I was putting this quilt together. I only had to get the seam ripper out twice because I wasn't paying attention to where the start points were. I don't know about you, but I'm going to call that a win. Once you have the rows sewn, it is important to go back through and double check that all the pieces are in the right place. This is your last opportunity. Once you start sewing the rows together, you'll do a lot more ripping if you've made a mistake. Once you've determined that everything is right, it's time to head to the ironing board. When pressing the rows, press towards the 5-inch squares that don't have star points. If you always press to the squares that don't have any other seams in them, when you go to sew the rows together, all the seams will nest and you'll have an easier time sewing it together. The only thing I had to be careful for was to not press over the top of my pins. They weren't my heat-resistant pins, so I had to be careful to go around those. You can press from the front side or you can press from the back side, whichever method you prefer. Once the rows are pressed, it's time to sew the rows together. I used pins where the seams would meet, even though they nested. You could do it without pins, but the pins help keep everything together while I was sewing the row. I sewed the first 2 rows together so I would have something to build the rest of the rows off of when I was putting the rows together. As I was putting the rows together, it was fun to watch the stars emerge from the pattern. I labeled these 2 rows A and B, and then each successive row I added the letter that came next in the alphabet. Just like the first 2 rows, I worked on 2 rows at a time. I added each row to the design floor after I got it pressed. You could sew the rows together as you go along, or you could wait and sew multiple rows at once. I wanted to throw in a little update on my situation with how many charm packs I have. At the end of the last charm video, I had 52 charm packs left. This quilt used 8, so I thought I was smart and got it down to 44. But then I did some cleaning to find some projects for my project of the month that I'm doing, and I found a dozen charm packs in various spots. I'd forgotten I had them, so I'm actually back up to 56 charm packs. So, oh well, I guess that means more videos for you. And for me, that means a lot more pretty quilts in my future. And thankfully, there's always new fabric coming out, so I bet my charm pack supply will stay around 40 to 50 at all times. We have a whole series of videos using charm packs, so if this is the first one you're seeing, check the description below for a link that'll take you straight to the playlist of all of our charm pack videos. Once I had all of the rows sewn and labeled, I started sewing them together in sets of 2. Except for the top row, which was a set of 3 because there was an odd number of rows in the quilt. After I sewed every set of rows, I pressed them, and you can just press to one side. It doesn't matter which direction the seam goes. After the sets of 2, you want to press and then sew them into sets of 4. You will have one set of 5. Then you will sew the sets of 4 together to make 2 half quilts, and then you'll sew the halves to each other. If you press as you go after each of the sets that you build, it's not so much pressing at the very end. It was really fun to watch this quilt come together. Once I had the quilt together, it was time to quilt it. I picked out a backing and used 100% cotton batting and quilted it on my long arm quilting machine. I used a natural color thread and a stipple pattern. For the binding, I just picked out a blue fabric that I thought looked good all the way around. I sewed the binding to the front side of the quilt, and then I pressed it and flipped it around to the back, pinning it into place with the clips, and then I top stitched it from the front side. It has the look of being hand stitched on the back side, even though it doesn't have the work of being hand stitched from the back side. The backing fabric that I picked was just an overall print I thought that the thread color would disappear into. We hope you will remember to hit the like button, leave a comment for us, share with your quilting friends, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and happy quilting!